The bell rang and the hallway filled with thunder. Shoes scuffed linoleum. Lockers slammed like restless hearts. Voices rose, trying to outshout invisibility. In the center of it all, a boy stood quietly, thin, freckled, the kind of stillness that draws attention from those who haven't yet made peace with their own reflection. And so, he was chosen. By a hand that shoved, a laugh that pierced, a group that watched. The bully was older, louder. He demanded tribute the way empires do, without mercy. The boy opened his backpack, pulled out a sandwich, peanut butter and honey wrapped in wax paper. He offered it not in fear, but in something else, a calm, a light that didn't blink. The bully froze. The hallway didn't, but he did. For one breathless moment, the world held its exhale. The boy waited, the sandwich in his outstretched hand, and the bully, shaken in places he didn't have words for, took it, but didn't eat. He stared at it, then at the boy, and something inside him crumbled. Tears, not loud, not many, but real. He walked away. No more words, just silence and something broken open. The boy stood alone, but he wasn't alone. The course begins this chapter by shifting our sight. It asks us not to correct what we see, but how we see. Perception is not passive, it is a choice. When you see with fear, you call forth guilt. When you see with love, you call forth innocence. Not because you are naive, because you remember. You remember that behind every act of violence is a child crying in the dark. Behind every insult, a wound. Behind every bully, a mirror. The Course tells us the innocence of God is the true state of the mind of His Son, T-3.181. And when you choose to see it, you return to it, not by force, but by quiet willingness. The boy did not win a battle. He revealed one, and in doing so, he ended it. Not outside, within. When you see the light in someone, even when they cannot see it in themselves, you make that light stronger, not only in them, in you. We are not separate, we are reflections, and the moment one sees clearly, the whole is changed. Give your attention not to what someone has done, but to what they are beneath it, and you will see yourself. Whole, innocent, unbroken. The sandwich was not a peace offering, it was a reminder of what we all came from and what we all still carry, even now. She woke from the dream with tears on her cheeks, not from fear, from something else, something harder to name. In the dream, she had been two people. One wore shame like skin, bent, apologetic, always trying to shrink. The other glowed, not because she was perfect, but because she remembered she didn't have to be. The shamed one moved through gray rooms. No one saw her. She wasn't allowed to speak. She repeated the same line over and over. I should have known better. The glowing one moved through fields. Light followed her like forgiveness. She spoke without apology. She laughed without looking for permission. At first, they didn't know the other existed. Then they collided. In a hallway, a mirror, a crack in the world. The shamed one gasped, tried to run, but the other reached out, gently touched her face, and said, "You were always me." That's when the dream broke, and she woke up. The Course teaches that you are not really capable of being tired, but you are very capable of wearying yourself. T-3.5 to 1. We weary ourselves by holding both voices in our mind, the voice that accuses and the voice that remembers. The mind is split, not because it is broken, but because it forgot how to unify. Fear says, hide. Love says, look. Fear says, you are two. Love says, you are one. She sat by the window that morning with her tea, hands wrapped around the mug like something sacred, and she didn't rush, didn't scroll, just sat and listened. She could still hear both voices, but now she wasn't trapped between them. She was the awareness behind them, and in that awareness, the fear began to fade. She no longer believed in the war. The Course calls this the healing of the split mind. It does not come from effort, it comes from willingness. Willingness to look upon both parts, not with judgment but with gentleness, to say, even this I can love. And when you do, the voice of love grows louder, not in volume. In resonance, it feels like peace, like presence, like remembering a name you thought you had lost. The girl in the dream wasn't two people. She was one, seen from two different states of mind. And now, she was waking up. He used to measure his worth in miles. Every step on the pavement was a promise. Every ache in his muscles a declaration. He believed movement meant value, that speed equaled progress, that sweat was a sacrament. Running gave him a sense of self, concrete, controllable, earned. And then, silence. The accident rewrote everything in a second. The doctor's voice echoed like wind in an empty canyon. You may never walk again. Those words didn't just stop his legs, they stopped time. The world shrank to the dimensions of a hospital bed, the pale green of the walls, the slow drip of morphine, and the sound of his own breath, always just a little too loud. He watched life from behind glass, watched others move, stretch, dance, forget their bodies. He hated them for it, then pitied himself for hating. Days blurred into each other. Mornings became obstacles, nights interrogations. He forgot the joy of stillness, because all he could hear was what he'd lost. Until one morning, before the sun had fully risen, before even the nurses had begun their rounds, he woke. Not because of pain, but because of quiet. Real quiet, not the absence of noise, but the presence of peace. A breeze slipped through the half-open window, carrying the scent of something green, alive. Outside, a bird called out into the gray-blue light, not to be heard, just because it could. He sat up slowly, not with effort, but with reverence. And then he noticed something he hadn't felt in weeks. Joy, not a loud kind, the kind that comes softly, uninvited, like light through trees. He didn't move, didn't need to. The air touched his skin, the silence cradled his mind. And in that stillness, something shifted. He didn't just understand. He remembered, I am not the body, I am the one who notices. And the one who notices is free. The Course reminds us, the body is merely a fact in human experience. Its abilities can be, and frequently, are over-evaluated. T-3, April 15. We chase performance, forgetting presence. We worship function, forgetting essence. But wholeness is never found in motion. It is remembered in rest. He sat at the window for hours, not waiting, receiving, and for the first time since the accident, he wasn't trying to get anywhere. He was already home. He would later say that was the day he stopped grieving his body and started living from his soul. Movement had given him purpose, stillness gave him truth, and now he could see again. He lost his sight at 23. A slow, creeping darkness, retinas surrendering one cell at a time. Doctors called it genetic, unstoppable, the kind of diagnosis that leaves no room for bargaining. He had painted since childhood, faces, always faces. He said he liked trying to find the moment a person truly appeared, past their pose, beyond their mask. When the blindness came, he stopped. For a while, packed away the brushes, cursed the light he could no longer follow, cursed God too, until one night in a dream, a voice said, "Paint them as they are, not as they appear." He woke with the words still ringing in his chest. He didn't think, he just moved, fumbled for his old brush, pulled a blank canvas from under the bed, mixed paints by memory, by instinct, by feel. He invited people over, friends, strangers, asked them to sit in silence. He never touched their faces, never asked for description. He just listened, not to their words, to their presence, the way their breath held hesitation or courage, the way their energy leaned in or pulled back, the truth beneath the noise. And then he painted, one stroke at a time, eyes closed, hands sure. What emerged weren't exact likenesses, but they were true. Viewers wept, not because the paintings were perfect, but because they saw something they didn't know they'd been hiding, their own innocence. The Course speaks of Christ's vision, not as seeing with the eyes, but seeing with the heart that remembers what is real. It tells us Christ's vision has one law. It does not look upon a body and mistake it for the Son whom God created. 20 August 3:7. The blind painter did not see the body. He saw the light within it, the place untouched by shame, unharmed by time, unedited by fear. And that sight, the sight of the soul, became his canvas. True vision is not hindered by blindness. It is hindered by judgment, by the need to label, to define, to categorize. But Christ's vision doesn't ask for explanation. It simply recognizes. And in that recognition, healing happens, not because anything changes, but because we finally see what was always there. The painter still cannot see light, but he has become it. His portraits don't reflect form, they reflect freedom. And the people who sit before him, they leave lighter because they were seen, not for who they try to be, but for who they are. And once you are seen like that, you can never unsee yourself again. The road was long, wet with mist and unfamiliar. He hadn't planned to stop. His map was clear, his route laid out. The rain was steady now, gentle but constant. It made the world blur at the edges, soft, like an old photograph. He passed a figure on the side of the road, lean, hunched beneath a tattered coat, one arm raised, hopeful. He almost kept driving, almost. But something in the man's posture, something in the way the rain didn't seem to matter to him, made him slow down. He rolled down the window. "Need a ride?" The man nodded. Quiet, worn, they drove for miles without speaking. The man smelled of tobacco and riverbanks, not unpleasant, just honest. Eventually, the traveler asked where he was headed. "Nowhere in particular," the man said, voice like gravel softened by time. "Just forward." They both laughed. It broke the silence open. The man began to talk about regrets, about roads not taken, about a woman with eyes like the sea and a boy he'd never met. The traveler listened, felt something tighten in his chest. A name was spoken, his mother's name. He pulled over, looked at the man, really looked, and asked a question he hadn't thought about in years. "Was she pregnant when you left?" The man turned, eyes wide, wet not from rain. He nodded. The car fell into stillness. It was him. His father. The man he'd never known. The man he'd hated. And yet, he had helped him, offered him warmth, kindness, before he knew. The Course teaches, when you meet anyone, remember it is a holy encounter. As you see him, you will see yourself. T-8.34 to 1. We think we meet strangers. We never do. We meet mirrors. We meet opportunities to forgive, to remember, to come home to something deeper than stories. The traveler had not known this was his father, but love knew. And love orchestrated the pause, the rain, the silence, the ride. Because the lesson was waiting, not just reunion, recognition, not of history, of truth. He didn't shout, didn't cry. He reached for the man's hand. They sat there by the side of the road, two timelines braided into one. No explanations, just presence. The encounter became sacred, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. You do not need to know the role someone plays. You only need to show up open, and the holy will reveal itself in a whisper, in a gesture, in a ride given when you almost kept driving. Every meeting is a chance to see the face of God, even if it's worn, even if it's late, even if it's unexpected. Love never misses its appointment, and neither did they. She stood in front of the mirror, tugging at the edges of her dress. No matter how she turned, something looked wrong. Too much here, not enough there. The voice in her head, quiet all day, now shouted, "They'll see you. They'll judge." It had been 10 years since the last reunion, 10 years since she left that small town behind. Its whispers, its eyes, its secrets. She hadn't wanted to go back, but something inside her ached, not for approval, for closure, for peace. The car ride felt longer than it should. The road familiar yet distant, like a dream you half remember. Her palms sweated on the steering wheel. Every mile carried the weight of memory. She almost turned around. Almost. The hall was lit with soft lights and nervous laughter. People mingled, aged versions of their younger selves. Same smiles, new scars. She paused at the door, held her breath, then stepped in. And nothing happened. No hush, no stares, no judgment. Just warmth, laughter, arms opened, names remembered, stories shared. One by one they greeted her, not as the girl they once knew, but as the woman standing before them. And in their eyes, she saw something she hadn't expected. Love, not pity, not pretense, just recognition. She laughed, cried a little, danced. The night passed like a page turning, and as she drove home, headlights tracing gentle arcs on the road, she whispered into the quiet, nothing had changed, except me. The Course teaches, perception selects and makes the world you see. T-21st of May, 1-1. We do not see with our eyes alone. We see with our beliefs, our wounds, our choices. Fear distorts. It shows us shadows where there are none. It turns memories into monsters, faces into masks. But love reveals. It unveils what was always there, innocence. The woman at the reunion hadn't escaped judgment. She had laid it down within herself. And in doing so, she changed the world she walked into. Not literally, energetically. The field shifted because the projector had been cleaned. And what once seemed dangerous now felt safe. We think the world must change for us to feel different. But the Course reminds us, the mind is the source, not the victim. When we choose to see with love, the entire world softens, brightens, heals. Not because it becomes perfect, but because we remember that we already are. So pause. Ask gently, what am I choosing to see? And who am I choosing to be? Perception is not fixed, it is given. And what you give, you receive. Always. The crash echoed through the house like a dropped heart, porcelain, shattered. tiny blue fragments across the wooden floor like ice cracked by grief. She stood frozen, small, still 7 years old. Her hands trembled, her breath caught somewhere between a sob and a silence. She had been reaching for the shelf, not out of mischief, not to disobey. She just wanted to feel close to something her mother had loved. But now, it was gone. Her father's footsteps came fast, heavy. She braced, prepared for the thunder of disappointment, for the lecture, the punishment, the voice that would confirm what she already feared. I am bad. But instead, he stopped, looked, saw the shards, yes, but saw her more. He didn't raise his voice. He knelt, not with anger, with presence. He met her eyes and asked, "What were you feeling?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Tears did. She fell into his arms, shaking. "I just felt alone," she whispered. That was the moment, not the vase breaking, the heart opening. The father held her, tighter than the object once held on the shelf. He whispered, "Thank you for telling me." The vase was forgotten. The real thing that broke was the story, the one that said she had to be perfect to be loved. The Course teaches correction does not mean punishment. It means healing. T-1 I.382. We've confused guilt with growth, believed that to teach a lesson, we must inflict pain. But real correction never attacks. It remembers. It remembers love. The child didn't need to be scolded. She needed to be seen, to be met, to be understood. That moment was not about the vase. It was about belonging, about teaching her that mistakes don't cost love, that vulnerability is not weakness, that real strength kneels before pain, not above it. The father had learned this not from books, but from his own wounds, and in choosing presence over punishment, he broke a cycle, not just for her, for himself. The ego corrects with fear. The spirit corrects with grace. One shames, the other softens. Correction is not about changing behavior, it's about restoring connection. And connection heals. What we do in these moments matters, not in their drama, in their direction. Will we push away or lean in? Will we harden or remember that behind every broken thing is a cry, and behind every cry is the chance to love more deeply than before. It was supposed to be a normal day. He woke before the alarm, drank his coffee in silence, tied his shoes with automatic precision. The city outside blinked to life like it always did. Buses groaning, people moving in pre-written scripts. But there was something, a tension in the air, a softness beneath the noise. He stepped out onto the sidewalk, briefcase in hand, and paused. The train station was 3 blocks east. That was the path he took every morning. But today, his feet hesitated. Not fear, not logic, just a pause. A whisper that said, "Go left." He frowned. There was no reason, no traffic, no delay, just a quiet sense of not this way. He stood still long enough to hear the voice of reason rise up. "You're going to be late. You'll miss the meeting." But something deeper spoke softer, and he listened. He turned left, took the long way, felt foolish. Until 20 minutes later, as he passed a bakery window, a man burst out of the shop, eyes wide. "You see that?" he asked. He hadn't. "The train station," the man said. "Explosion. Something about gas. It's bad." Time bent. He stood in the middle of the street, heart slow, mind quiet. He should have been there. He would have been, but he wasn't. Not because he predicted it, because he followed something else. The Course reminds us, The Holy Spirit does not speak first, but he always answers. T-6, April 1-2. That answer often comes not in thunder, but in stillness, a nudge, a tug behind the ribs, a knowing that can't be explained but also can't be denied. The ego demands proof. The spirit invites trust. The man didn't save his life through cleverness. He saved it by listening, by obeying something most would ignore. And in that choice, something opened. Later that night, he stood on his balcony, city lights shimmering like stars reborn. He didn't feel lucky. He felt seen, held, guided. He whispered, "Thank you," not to the sky, but to the silence within, to the voice he'd almost silenced. You felt it too. That pull toward or away, that moment when your gut says no or yes, and you don't know why. That's not fear. That's your compass. It doesn't need to argue. It just waits for your willingness. And when you follow it, even once, something ancient reawakens. The part of you that remembers the way home. The part of you that knows you are never alone. Not on the street, not in confusion, not even in delay. Guidance is not dramatic. It is divine, and it is always speaking. The question is, will you listen? The air inside the prison was dry, thick with stories, none spoken aloud. Cell 14, Block C. The man inside was not what he used to be, not because of age or punishment, but because of time. Time had stripped away the arrogance, the justifications, left behind only silence, and the ache of something undone. He didn't talk to the guards, not out of pride, out of emptiness, until one day he heard a sound he recognized, not with his ears, with his bones, a cry, software choked, human. He turned. The guard on duty, usually cold, clipped, indifferent, stood against the wall, shoulders shaking, not from rage, from grief. The prisoner stepped forward, nothing planned, no strategy, just presence. The guard looked up, eyes red. She would have been 9 today. He didn't need to explain. The prisoner reached into his pocket, pulled out a small paper crane he had folded earlier that week. A habit, a prayer with wings. He held it out. The guard hesitated, then took it, and for one moment, one impossible moment, they both saw her. Not the child either had lost, but the innocence behind the loss, in the one who cried in the cell, and the one who cried outside it. They were not roles, not labels, just 2 men, 2 fathers, 2 human hearts remembering what truth feels like. The Course says, when you recognize what you are and what your brothers are, you will realize that judging them in any way is without meaning. T-3.63:1. Judgment lives in form, equality lives in being, and the miracle, it begins the instant you let perception fall away. We are not the masks we wear. We are not the sides we're told we're on. Innocence is not a trait, it is a fact. Unchangeable, unbroken, still glowing beneath every hardened shell. That moment between the prisoner and the guard, it wasn't dramatic, it was sacred, not because of what was said, but because of what was dropped. Defense, separation. Story, they saw beyond the armor and found each other again. Not in the past, not in ideology, but in the place where pain meets love and does not flinch. That place is holy, and it is always available. You don't need to be behind bars to remember it, just willing to look into another's eyes and see yourself. Whole, unashamed, one. The miracle of equality is not a wish, it is a vision, Christ's vision, and it sees not what divides us, but what was never separate to begin with. It began with a whisper, a single sentence laced with just enough poison to stain the room. It passed between hands like a folded note, unfolded in secret, believed without question. The girl on the receiving end of the rumor didn't fight it. She carried it. Like a cloak too heavy for her shoulders, she left town within a month. Not because she had done anything wrong, but because the silence around her screamed louder than any accusation. Years passed. The one who spoke the words, the gossip, forgot them, or tried to, buried them beneath motherhood, marriage, charity events. She became someone respected, someone who wore kindness like perfume. But some nights, when the room was quiet, her chest tightened. She didn't know why, until one day they saw each other again. At a memorial, same town, same church, same eyes. The girl, now a woman, stood at the podium. She spoke not of death, but of life. And then she paused, turned, looked directly at the woman who had once destroyed her name. "I used to believe I was broken," she said, "but I see now. It was never about me. It was about a story that needed to be healed." Silence gripped the room. She continued, "I forgive you, publicly, completely, because what you said didn't define me, and it doesn't define you either." No one moved. Something holy had entered. Not loud, not grand, just still. The Course reminds us judgment was made to be a weapon used against the truth. T-20 March 1-2. And forgiveness? Forgiveness lifts the veil. Judgment is the blindfold we put over our eyes. Forgiveness removes it, not to erase the past, but to see it differently. The woman who spread the rumor had lived inside her own prison, built not of bars but of guilt. She had smiled through it, decorated it, pretended it wasn't there. But when the words were spoken aloud, the door opened. She wept, not out of shame, but out of relief. Judgment dissolves in the light, and forgiveness is the light switch. We think to judge is to protect ourselves. But what we're really doing is closing our eyes, because to truly see another means we must see ourselves too. The girl had not returned for revenge. She came back as a healer, and in doing so, she became free. The room filled with old ghosts and older stories breathed together again, and in that breath, something shifted. Forgiveness is not weakness, it is fire. It burns away illusion and reveals only the soul beneath. And when you see that soul, you can't unsee it. You can only love it. He hadn't called him father in years, not out of rebellion, but out of distance. The kind that grows not in a single moment, but over time, like vines curling between cracks, quietly separating what once was whole. His father was a man of stone, strong, cold, silent. He taught discipline, not affection. He taught silence, not tenderness. And when the boy grew into a man, he carried that silence like armor, until the phone rang. Room 204, third floor, end of the hall. His father was dying. There was no ceremony to it, no cinematic apology, just a bed, machines, and the stale scent of waiting. He stood in the doorway, unsure. The man on the bed was smaller now, fragile. His breath shallow, measured by rhythm, not will. He sat. He didn't plan to speak, but the silence begged for something true, so he said it. "I blamed you for not saying the words I needed, for making me strong in all the wrong places." His father blinked. He kept going. "But I see now, you gave what you knew. And maybe that was love too." A long pause. Then his father reached out, just barely. fingers trembling like leaves in wind. The sun held them, and in that touch, something broke, not apart, open. Forgiveness entered the room like morning light. Slow, software certain. He stayed until the machines quieted, until his father slipped away, not into darkness, but into peace. As he left the hospital, something shimmered. The trees looked brighter. The pavement glowed. Even strangers' faces seemed wrapped in gentle light, not golden in color, golden in presence. It wasn't the world that had changed. It was how he saw it. The Course says, what you project, you believe, and what you believe, you perceive. T-21st of May, 1-6-7. Perception is not passive, it's participatory. The light you give is the light you receive. He had walked into that room carrying blame, but he walked out having laid it down. And in doing so, the veil lifted, not forever, but enough to remember that forgiveness is not just for them, it's for you. Because when you release the story, the resentment, the need to be right, you don't just set them free. You set yourself free, free to see again, free to love again, free to walk in a world that isn't out to punish, but to mirror. He looked up, and the sky looked back with softness. For the first time in his life, he didn't just forgive his father. He saw him, and in that seeing, he saw himself. He built his life on questions, on careful observation, controlled environments, hypotheses that bent the world into something knowable. He wasn't cold, he was precise. He studied emotion the way some study stars, distant, fascinating, always slightly out of reach. His focus, love, why people fall, what chemicals stir, what patterns repeat. He wrote papers, held lectures, spoke of attraction as circuitry, of romance as evolutionary strategy. Students took notes, nodded, quoted him. He was respected, but alone, not because he didn't try, because he didn't trust what couldn't be measured. Until the day his son was born. The hospital lights were too bright, the air smelled of bleach and beginning. He waited outside, palms slick, trying to name the emotion rising in his throat. Not fear, not joy, something ancient, something soft and wild. Then he was called in. They placed the child in his arms, so small, so warm, so perfectly helpless. And in that instant, all data disappeared. No formula could describe it, no analysis could contain it. His son opened his eyes, and he fell, not into confusion, into surrender, into the truth. The truth that love doesn't ask for proof. It simply arrives. And when it does, it burns away every need to explain. The Course teaches, the ego analyzes, the Holy Spirit accepts. T-11 May 13:1. Love doesn't dissect, it doesn't demand understanding. It invites, it waits. And when the mind softens, when the heart lets go of its defenses, love enters like breath, unseen, essential, undeniable. He had spent years trying to name it, and in one moment he simply allowed it. Later he would say the child taught him more than any textbook, that in those tiny fingers wrapped around his own he found a miracle. Not because he figured it out, because he stopped needing to. Love cannot be captured. It must be felt, lived, given, and when it is, everything else fades. You are not here to study love. You are here to become it, to remember that what you are is not a question to be answered, but a truth to be lived. That night he held his son as the city slept. No graphs, no theories, just a rhythm between two hearts. And in that rhythm he heard something he had never written, never read. You are loved. always, and nothing else is real. It was a simple prayer, not dramatic, not spoken aloud, just a quiet plea breathed into the morning before her feet touched the floor. Let me be peace today. She didn't know what it meant. Not really. She just knew the world felt heavy, that people seemed thinner around the eyes, that silence had become sharp instead of soft. So she whispered that hope into the air, then moved on, brushed her teeth, caught the train, bought a coffee, walked to work. At the intersection, a man stood waiting to cross. She didn't know his name, didn't know that last night he had written a note, didn't know that he had stood on the edge of his bathtub for nearly an hour, the world spinning beneath him, aching to disappear. She didn't see that his hands trembled inside his coat. All she saw was his eyes, and in them something lost. So she smiled, nothing more, just a smile that said, "I see you, you exist." Then the light changed. They crossed paths and never spoke. But something in him cracked. A pause, a question, a flicker. That night he didn't open the drawer, didn't unfold the note. He sat on the floor with a bowl of soup and stared at nothing, and wept. Not from sadness, from release. He didn't know her name, but he remembered her face. That smile, and it held him. The Course tells us, thoughts increase by being given away. T-5.12:1. Love is never lost. It does not diminish when shared, it expands. Every loving thought is a cause, and every cause has an effect that ripples beyond what the eyes can track. We think power is loud, but power is in the unseen. In the moment you choose kindness instead of reaction, in the breath you take before speaking, in the smile you give when no one is watching. You are not separate from the miracle. You are its messenger. You are its delivery. That girl didn't know she had saved a life. She didn't need to. Her prayer had already moved through time, woven its way into the perfect place, and met the man exactly where he stood, on the edge of despair. This is how the light works. Quietly, precisely, eternally. So pray, not for things, for presence, for peace, and then move through the world as if your thoughts have wings, because they do. He found himself walking through a dream, barefoot, in a landscape made of fragments, pieces of glass, wood, paper, each one marked with memory, a laugh, a mistake, a night he tried to forget. They were everywhere, floating in air, embedded in soil, drifting in streams of soft gold. He tried to gather them. Each piece seemed essential, vital. Some cut his hands, others made him cry. He held a shard and saw his childhood. Another showed the woman he loved and lost. A third, his face contorted with shame. He kept collecting, thinking, if I put them back together, I'll be whole again. He worked for what felt like lifetimes, kneeling in dust, trying to build himself back. But something was always missing, until he heard a voice, not outside, within. You were never broken. He stopped, looked at the pieces in his arms, and for the first time, saw light between them. Not gaps. Light, the kind that joins, not separates. He opened his hands, let the pieces fall, and they didn't shatter. They shimmered, melted into each other like fog joining sky. He stood, not mended, but remembered, and woke with tears in his eyes. The Course says, healing is not creating, it is reparation. The Holy Spirit promotes healing by looking beyond it to what the children of God were before healing was needed. T-5.5.3:5. You are not a puzzle, not a problem to be solved. You are a song that forgot its melody, now beginning to hum again. Wholeness is not outside you. It is not behind achievement, perfection, or penance. It is not earned. It is inherited, given, and never truly lost. The man in the dream didn't need to glue himself back together. He needed to stop believing he was in pieces. The parts of your life that feel shattered, they are still held in the hands of love, still part of the tapestry. The ego tells you that healing requires effort, that union must be built. But the miracle whispers, it is already so. All you are doing is remembering. Each time you pause, each time you forgive, each time you let go of the belief that something has gone wrong, you return. Not to a better version of you, but to the you that was never undone. So stop collecting shards. Let them shimmer. Let them show you what was always true. The light was never in the pieces. It was in you. She sat on the edge of her bed, the night warm with memory. The room was still, not silent, just still. The kind of stillness that listens. Her fingers traced the scar on her side. It had been years. The surgery was long over, but the scar remained. Not angry, not loud, just present. Once she hated it, covered it, avoided mirrors, believed it ruined her beauty, her story, her peace. But tonight, she touched it differently, not as a flaw, as a teacher, and she smiled. This, too, she whispered, is part of the story. That moment didn't fix anything, because nothing needed fixing. What it did was reveal that her innocence had never been lost, just buried. The Course teaches innocence is not a partial attribute. It is not real until it is total. T-14 April 3-6. You cannot be partly innocent. You are either as God created you, or you are nothing. And since nothing cannot exist, only one truth remains. You are whole. Even with the scars, even with the choices you regret, even with the nights you wept into your own hands and said, I don't know who I am anymore. Even then, especially then, because innocence is not perfection. It is presence. It is the willingness to look at your life with soft eyes, to hold every part, the bright, the broken, the beautiful, and say, this belongs. I belong. And in that belonging, you begin to see others differently, not as bodies, not as histories, but as light learning to remember itself. So if this story touched something in you, if you felt your heart nod in the silence, then stay with us. We're walking the pages of A Course in Miracles, Sa. Not to master it, to be mastered by it, to soften, to return, to remember, subscribe, because your journey is sacred. Leave a comment, let us know where your healing has begun, and share this with someone who forgot what innocence feels like. Together we are reclaiming what was never truly lost, not in theory, in living, in forgiving, in seeing the miracle in every scar, every soul, every you. You are not broken, you are becoming, and I will meet you. In the next chapter, the light is waiting.